Thanks everyone for being here. This is the All Black Everything Roundtable, which we have at 8 p.m. Eastern. We have a fantastic group of individuals here. Super excited to meet all of them. If you're watching this on YouTube later on, please like, comment, and subscribe. Stick around. We got more content for you here. So yeah, and share. Also share the stream, or the VODs or whatever. Right? Share everything. It helps us a lot. Okay. So we are going to start by introducing my man Bam, back with us, Black American Made. Bam, excited to have you around, my friend. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. Yeah, Crime said it. I'm Bam, Black American Made. I I thought did other stuff, but I don't do anything else except for this and go to work. Yeah, I think that this is actually a fantastic group of people, and I think this is going to be a wonderful conversation.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. Next, we have our man. Well, I'm very, very excited to see again. He's been gone for a little bit because he had business to handle, right? Off doing great things, right? Like showing a bit of a black excellence. Thank you, D10 Dream, our man Hot Team, back here. Dream, could you tell people what you were doing?
Absolutely. I got the amazing opportunity with the NAACP to go to Ghana for a 10, 11-day excursion with about like 50 other students. And we got to learn about the history of the relationship between Ghana and Atlantic slave trade. Got to see the dungeons where slaves were held, which is very emotional, very powerful. We went to the Last Bath River where slaves were chained and given their last bath. And then we saw the Door of No Return, where slaves were put through this door, and the Door of No Return means they were set on the ship to go on a 4-month boat ride, and they never returned to their homeland. So this trip was amazing, but my highlight was just getting to learn the Ghanaian culture, meeting a bunch of like queens and kings of different tribes.
Oh, wow.
We got okay. And then what else? Oh yeah, the food is amazing. The people are really nice. So, and we had a little thing with it was a partnership with the Mormon Church, so that was a little thing. We got to see the Mormon churches in Ghana, and we saw the little racism there. And us at the NAACP was like, yeah, we want y'all to stop being racist. And we had a little fight about that with the NAACP people versus the Mormon Church. But it was like the Mormon Church students that were our age was down with it, but the elders, they're old mentality people, and they want to change. So we was critiquing that, so that was cool. Oh, and one of the queen mothers was like saying that she wants me to be one of the chiefs at her village. So that's really cool. I'm gonna start learning Twi, which is the main Ghanaian language.
They wanted you to be a chief.
Yeah, anybody can be a chief as long as you're helping the people of the village. They can, and if people of the village want you to be a chief, you can be a chief.
The next thing I was gonna say, that sounds like in Scotland, right, where you can be like a lord, and it's like they'll like sell you an acre of land, right, like basically ceremoniously, like you're a lord and lady.
Except you don't have any responsibilities as a lord, but in Ghana you have responsibility to that village to help them.
Okay, all right. Well, it sounds amazing, and I'm very happy that you had that opportunity. That's like really great.
And Jade was with me, by the way. Jade was there the whole time.
Well, then why don't we introduce Jade next? Jade, Thanks for coming back, Jade. We're very, very excited to see you. I see you with your braids here, right? Like special African hairstyle here. How are you? And how was like your journey?
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I wanted to make sure. Hi, thanks for having me back. It was so much fun. I was actually sad to come back to the US. I didn't want to leave Ghana. I was having so much fun, except for the food. We had a lot of spicy food. I love spicy food, so I didn't think it would bother me, but I think by like day 7, having it consistently for lunch and dinner, my stomach just wasn't agreeing with it. So we were all talking about the first thing we were going to eat when we got back, and I saw a Chick-fil-A when we left DC in the airport. So as soon as we got back, Hasim and I headed there for breakfast before I flew back home to Atlanta. But I had so much fun. I got to meet a lot of Mormons, as Hatim shared, and I didn't know there were so many Black Mormons before that trip. So that taught me a lot about that. We got to, visit slave dungeons, see where the slaves took their last bath, see W.E.B. Du Bois's home in Ghana. It was a very amazing experience, and I feel like now I have like an origin to my story of being an African American in the U.S. So yeah, I really liked it. I had so much fun.
Tell them about your the DNA test that you took.
But yeah, so we did an African ancestry test for our maternal side, and we found out that my mother's side is from Cameroon or has some presence in Cameroon. So that was cool to learn. I've also done 23andMe before, and Cameroon wasn't on there, so it was a little shocking. Like Nigeria has been on there, so I thought that would be my result. But it was interesting, and I'm excited to learn more about it. So yeah.
Oh, that was absolutely fantastic. It sounds amazing. I'm like completely freaking jealous. Hopefully one day. Yeah, right? Like
you guys can sign up. It's a yearly thing. It's this was the first year, so next year you guys can sign up and hopefully get it.
Okay. And side note, yeah, those Mormons be putting in a lot of work. In terms like spreading their religion, they put in the work. So it's not at all surprising to me that they're there. But, okay, so let's continue on. We have our friend Pace back with us again, DeAndre Pace. How are you doing?
I'm well. How are you all today?
All right.
Is the microphone working fine? Because when I tested myself,
It's good.
Discord was doing stupid stuff again, as it always does. I'm glad to be back. Probably a little bit low energy. I'm rather tired today. So, fortunately, these seem to be pretty lax topics.
Oh,
I'll show you.
I can always trust Fnatic not to disappoint me.
Absolutely. But yeah, we'll see about that. But anyway, Pace, I'm very happy to have you here. Shout out to you. All right. We have a friend, Lee the Water Kai. Lee, how are you, buddy? Thanks for coming through.
Surviving this summer humidity. It's gonna be all right.
Anything else?
No, everything's cool.
Oh, all right, cool. All right, summer humidity. All right, there you go. And now, a very special guest, our friend Jay Cooksnada. She is back. We are so happy. Like, we've missed Jay Cook. Jay Cook, like if you've been, part of the show for any length of time, you know about Jay Cook. And she is a very valued member of this community, but had stuff to do in her own personal life. But now she's here. And like the lineup is complete. How are you doing, Jay Cook?
I'm doing so well. How are you, Prime?
Doing fantastic. Oh, well, you're here. I'm doing fantastic.
Hell yeah. Let's go. Yeah, my name is Jay Cooksnada. I haven't been here in a many moons. But I'm glad to be, back doing the panels. I'm going to be here regularly, so I'm ready to get back into it.
All right, thanks so much. Okay, and last and one of the best, my man, Mr. Fnatic. Fnatic is back with us. Fnatic is going to be here, right? Like he told me before, right? He told me before we got started. He's like, I'm gonna be chill today. I'm going to be cool. I'm be calm.
Did I say that today? Because I don't think so. I just had me some coffee. I'm turning up. But no, I'm really excited to be here. I think I've been reviewing like some of my old content and some of the old panels that I've been in the All Black Everything, and just some of the conversations we've had, and it really makes me excited because I whenever I see that stuff, it makes me think, man, like there's really good conversations had here, so I should take this really seriously and actually, you know, be excited that I'm able to talk to other good people. Yeah, I think these topics will be great. I'm jealous this nigga got to go to Africa. That sounds like freaking a dream. I mean, he's from Africa technically, so I mean, it's not like his first time there, but I'm saying like it's still freaking dream. One of these days, I'm gonna end up making that happen. Yeah, I can't wait for these topics.
All right, and you and me both. I gotta definitely. I'm saying we, but like I'm definitely going to. At least separately, we're gonna travel to Africa at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I gotta
Fanatic, sign up next year, Fanatic. I got you.
I will, 100%.
Yeah. I made it to every other continent. I gotta get to Africa. Okay, so let's get started. Topic 1. The famous black actor Idris Elba is at a center of debate about nepotism. His daughter Isen, I guess that's how it's pronounced, tried out for a role in one of his upcoming movies, but didn't get it. This sparked a conversation about whether nepotism in the black community is a good thing. Some believe that this is an important way that we can build generational wealth. Others feel like this perpetuates an unfair system that has kept black people out of higher circles for centuries. Do you think black nepotism is something to be celebrated, or is this just as corrosive to us as it is to our society? And a shout out to my man Issue Gambit, who sent me this story. Maybe he might stop by later on in the panel, but maybe not. He's a busy guy, but still, thank you for coming up with this. Yeah, so I think this is a super interesting topic, right? Like giving your kids these opportunities. Because, did they necessarily earn it, right? But then, like, we have a society where other people don't earn things all the time. Oh, hold on, 1 second, hold on. I just got a DM from Gambit, and I think what he's trying to tell me is that he is going to show up, and he really wants to talk about this, and he wants me to do it second. Okay. All right. So, if that's the case, I would really like that to happen. So I'm going to switch it up. Pretend you didn't hear any of that. Okay? All right. So hopefully he'll make it. All right. Other topic. Recently, a black mother filed a lawsuit against the Los Angeles School District. She says her daughter experienced extreme emotional distress because of a school project where students actually picked cotton, like physically picked cotton, to understand what slavery was like. The daughter did not actually pick any cotton, but is said to have suffered from panic attacks because she watched over students performing the task. Do you think the school was out of line for making this a project? Is the mother/daughter overreacting, or is this yet another example of schools subjecting kids to racist projects under the guise of education? Okay, all right. Again, pretend you didn't hear the other thing. So in terms of this, it is as simple as it sounds. Right, like the school literally grew a field of cotton. Right, they planted a cotton field, and they had kids like picking the cotton. And this is what slavery was like. And then a mother was upset that her daughter had to participate, and then she's like, this is like 5 years later. This I think happened in 2017. Now she's like filing a lawsuit because her daughter is suffering all kinds of mental distress still because of this. I have thoughts about how real this is, but that's what you guys all here afford to, because I really want to hear what you have to say, because this sounds super interesting to me. All right, Bam, please.
Yeah, when I was reading this, I was like, I'm so serious. Like, I was like looking for the story. Like, okay, where's the twist when I'm reading it? Because for y'all who, everybody knows at this point because I always talk about it. I grew up in the very rural South. We did this in high school. Actually, we didn't do this. Not in high school. We did this in elementary school. We took a field trip to go to. We went to the cotton. We went to a cotton field. We went to like plantation. We did history things because I grew up close to I'm not even. It's not gonna be doxing myself. It's a big thing. It's Chickamauga Battlefield, which is was a big battlefield during the Civil War, and there's tons of cotton fields throughout the South. So yeah, like we took field trip, picked some cotton, even got to take it home with you, and it was. To me, it was lit. Like we raced. It was a race. Like who could pick the most cotton on your row? And I was going down through there. I was a natural. I was bred for this field. I was 100% field nigga. I'm sorry. No, but like then you get older. You turn 16. And you like this was effed up. Why the hell I was out there picking cotton? Now to add in, I went to a predominantly white. I grew up in a predominantly white area, so it was mostly white kids out there picking cotton. But I honestly think it was on like a slavery apology sort of tip, sort of saying like, see, like the kids are laughing. It's not that bad. Like we're drinking lemonade. Like it's, like who's picking cotton? So I think it was like it's probably racist for like different reasons, but. Yeah, I personally experienced this. I'm sure somebody in LA wouldn't have tolerated that though. But yeah, we'll see where it goes.
Wow. All right, this is already escalated. Thank you so much for that. Holy crap. All right, let's go to my man D10 Dream.
I think this issue is simple for me because I think it's about the choice. Like if you have the choice to go or not to go, I think this field trip is fine because like I can imagine that somebody would be upset that they visited the slave dungeon. Like, let's say the field trip, hey, you get a free trip to Ghana, you get to visit a slave dungeon, and they get a panic attack there because they've seen people in the slave dungeon. I don't see how that's different than you going to a field and picking cotton, where when I went to the slave dungeon, I felt a spiritual and emotional depth, and I was really upset when I was in there because I got to experience slightly how it felt to be there with open doors and with windows which weren't there at the time, and I was already having trouble breathing. So in my mind I was imagining all the atrocities that was occurring at that time, but I had a choice to go there. I could have left at any time, right? So I'm okay with that. Versus like over here in the States, you go to a field picking cotton. If you had the choice not to go to that field trip and you went anyways, then that's like kind of like your issue, right? Like you chose to look at that, you chose to go. But if they didn't have the choice to go, then that is an issue that I think they do have a good situation and lawsuit at their hand. Like that's probably a good lawsuit. Like, why'd you force my child to go through that? But if they had a choice and they chose to go, that seems like an issue that they could have avoided.
Thanks so much. Next, we have our friend Pace. Love to hear your opinion.
I'm of the opinion that this is one of the weakest legal cases I've ever heard of, and it's clearly done about the money. There's no possible way somebody's gonna have a fucking panic attack because they're out there picking cotton and never actually experienced any real slavery. They weren't out there being beaten or being whipped. They weren't out there seeing anybody get beaten or being whipped, and then all of a sudden have a panic attack and they can't sleep at night because they picked cotton this one time all these years ago. Like hell, if that was the case, I'd have a panic attack every time I go to a cornfield for having to wake up every morning and the pre-dawn and get my fucking fingers cut open because of the corn stalks. Yeah, it's a weak legal case. However, our legal system is very weak right now, and it's always trying to do everything it can to make racial amends. So I can see where they could have a case depending on where the case is tried. If it's tried in a more liberal area, which it probably is, then I could see it probably passing, and that'll cost the taxpayers a lot of money because the school doesn't have any money on its own.
So I think this should be something that's on a permission slip basis only. I don't personally like the idea of the trip altogether, but I can see where it'd be educational. Coming from a background that I'm from, where my great grandfather was a slave and then a sharecropper, and my father picked cotton with him, my father wouldn't want me to experience that. And I think a lot of other people would feel the same way. So we need to understand how close this experience was to modern day America and how that can affect people. And I'm done.
Hey, all right. I'm loving like the range of opinions we got here. Let's go to Jay Cook.
Yeah, I want to echo Pace. We are not that far removed from slavery, and the fact that generational trauma does exist. You can have a physical and psychological response to something. I don't know the merits of what this situation is, but you can have a physical and psychological response to generational trauma. It's been proven. The fact that the school it was kind of like, oh no, what happened? We didn't know this was happening. Is their response is a little weak to me, but to agree with Kai's point, not Pace. But it's very interesting how long it's taken to put this as a case, but I don't want to focus on that. I know that's not the point here.
Much. And did you want to agree with Kai? You said Pace, but like
yeah, I agree with Kai. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Let's go to Fanatic, please.
Well, I also agree with Water Kai. I think anybody who's ever studied any amounts of epigenetics recognizes that this is something that absolutely is reasonable, or you could even expect to affect people in the way that it's affecting that girl. And I think it's absolutely tragic. I think it's really, really gross. I don't think that this is particularly educational. I don't know what you're going to teach them. Oh, look, see, you're going to pick cotton for 10 minutes and then you'll understand what the grueling work it was to be enslaved. No, to the contrary. You're going to pick it and say, it didn't seem like it was that big of a deal. It wasn't that problematic. It wasn't that difficult at that young age. And I don't think most of them are going to sit there and be able to recognize that it's not just the single act in and of itself. It's the length of time that you're doing that act, and like the threats of violence, and of course the raping, and the buck breaking, and all of these other things associated with slavery that make slavery so disgusting. That's what makes me frustrated so much whenever I hear white people try to compare whatever labor problems they're going through with whatever boss they don't like to slavery. This is modern day slavery to pay us these low wages. They're paying us slave wages. All of that kind of nonsense really, really, really degrades or dismisses the depravity of the chattel slavery in the United States. Obviously, I mean, the ownership, and then obviously the fact that if you have children, those children are automatically slave. None of those things are going to be learned from that thing. All you're going to see is, hey, here is a job that people still perform today that that people were forced to do for free. That's so not giving the proper message there. So I think it's gross. I also do think that this girl is probably playing it up some. I think the only reason why she would be having panic attacks is if her mother planted that stuff in her head. I don't think she should, by the grace of God, have the context to understand why this is so insane. So I think that stuff is made up. I think they're doing the most.
Okay. Thank you. And finally, Jade.
Also agree with Kai. I feel like this should have been written. I didn't see, what was sent home about the field trip, but I feel like where they were going, what the activity was going to be specifically, should have been written on a permission slip and required a parent's signature, and then possibly had the option to come. I do believe that these panic attacks she could be having are real. Growing up, I've seen like Tales from the Hood, American History X, and Roots. And because just teaching me about my history was very important to my mom. And so watching those movies, I used to have nightmares about the Ku Klux Klan like all the time growing up. And then my mom telling me like it was still a thing, it was still real. I had several nightmares about that, and just going to museums, seeing the costumes in the museum, I would freak out. So I definitely believe that if her mom has taught her about this, she could very well have panic attacks from this thing. And it's just sad to hear that that's happened. Luckily, I never had to do anything like that growing up in the South. I never had a field trip like that, but I have heard things of that nature, or somebody having like a slave day at school where one room would be like, you know, runaway slaves could be in this room. Another, it's just, I've heard outlandish stories about the great lengths that schools have gone to teach about slavery. And it's weird because I've never heard any similar stories about teaching about like the Holocaust or anything like that. So I just find it weird that they want to do like a let's play it out for slavery, but not for anything else very traumatic in history.
So I guess I'll give my opinion. I don't agree with Mordecai. Fuck you. Yeah, I don't agree with this. I agree in very small parts. Like, one, that this is closer than people realize, right? Like, slavery seems like something so distant, right? Like, so far in the past that's like untouchable to us, but literally it's within like living memory, right? It's still within living memory. There are people who like, I think the last slave, like the last actual slave, like died like a little while ago. But like there are people whose parents were slaves that were still alive. So like it's something that's real. So I'll give that, right? And then I'll also give that this. I don't necessarily know the necessity of this, right? Like how much is actually teaching them. So I don't know. I this wouldn't have been my first idea of things to do, but okay. But still, this idea that this girl is this broken up over not participating, right? She wasn't forced. Then like take a whip. It's like, oh no, we gotta make sure you know what it's like to be a slave, right? Right? Then no one beat her, no one chased her, no, anything like that. She like apparently just did not take part of this, and she just observed others doing it, and that triggered her to such an extent that now this school has to be sued. So I don't buy that shit at all. I don't buy it at all. Fuck that, right? I think we can traumatize students in all kinds of ways, but I'm not willing to believe 1 second this woman is just this child so broken up about just what, like, you've seen black people pick cotton, right? You've like, if you've grown up in America and you're black, eventually you watch a slave struggle story, right? Did that break you too? Like this is some
Yeah, it
like
does.
conservatives say, like this is some
Hold on, what are you
snowflake shit
talking
right
about,
here.
Prime?
It
What are you
absolutely
talking?
does. Have you watched,
Yeah.
like, when I watched the movie Rosewood, and I tell people this stuff all the time, I think those kind of movies are toxic as hell because Rosewood made me hate white people for a little bit. And it had took me a while to sit there, especially because I watched it as a pretty young man. It took me a while, probably about 15, 16. And I remember thinking to myself at that point, I have to unlearn or recognize that this is not all white people. Like I had to constantly remind myself because I think those things do like resonate with you. You do have those memories in your head. And I think like this little girl is just a perfect example of that. Like, bro, it's gross. I don't think you have
Memories in
to.
your head of doing something you've never had to do before.
No. It didn't create memories in my head of having to do anything, but it does give me a resonance and an understanding of the atrocities that other people went through. And then some people are going to be more empathetic than others. And I think as a result of that empathy, some people might start feeling feel some type of whatever, like associated with the idea of watching other people go through trauma. And I think it wouldn't be that hard for that person, especially if they're teaching it to school. This is what your ancestors experienced. It's what your ancestors went through, and so on and so forth. It's not that hard for a person, a particularly empathetic person, to like see that and think to themselves like, "Wow, this is really gross," and begin feeling traumatized in some ways. And again, let's not forget about epigenetics. I think that's
It's
an
not
excuse
real.
enough. Oh, you okay? Well, if you're a science denier, I can't debate you, and I won't debate you because I don't think
Well,
I think that's beneath me.
I happen to study science all day long, and you cannot find any scientific evidence that says that trauma is passed down genetically. Now, it can be passed down through teachings which are not genetic. So people can be taught as you experience, as you explained earlier, where you can watch these documentaries, you can do these things. Those things can simulate sorts of responses. But let's not sit here and say that that trauma is passed down through our genetics, which it is not.
Well, I'm not saying anything. What I'm saying is the science is already out that clearly demonstrates that epigenetics is a thing. I'm not going to debate epigenetics with you.
So if you
You're
can find
beneath me.
me, if you can find me the exact
You're
genotype
beneath
that
me if you
passes
try to
down trauma,
deny.
I
You're
will
beneath
admit
me.
it.
You're beneath me if you're trying to deny the idea of science being real, and it's literally not worth my time. But for everyone else, we can
So
continue to have it.
find the
For everyone
genotype,
else,
find the genome.
but for everyone else, we can continue to have the conversation if we would like about epigenetics. If someone's going to literally deny that the Earth is round, and we want to start talking about how satellites function, I'm not going to have a debate with you on that. That's beneath me. It's beneath you. But everyone else who actually is not going to be in science denial, we can have those conversations.
So
Yeah,
it's not a
psychological
particular
science
genome. It's
about genetics. You see, that's the thing. When you're dealing with things that deal with that type of science, all of that is based upon pure speculation. There is no genes that can be spliced to that type of trauma. You can talk all day long
Spliced?
about
no.
I don't
about
think you know what you're talking. Who's talking about
about
splicing genes?
psychological.
You don't even know what
You're not
talking about.
understanding what I'm talking about.
You just
You
said
can do it
spliced.
all.
Who's talking about splicing genes?
I'm not talking about splitting them that way. I'm talking about having if
You just
you
used the
took a
word
gene.
splice. What did you mean instead?
What I'm saying is if you go and you find any gene, you cannot
Yeah, you don't know
take
what you're
that
talking about. Why
gene
am I asking
and
you?
remove it and remove from that gene and anything that shows that it has imprinted with trauma.
Okay.
These
Everyone
are
else,
psychological studies, and
got you.
psychological
Everyone
studies
else,
So
I
have no
encourage you
merit.
to actually study. I'm sorry, not study. It's not that I'm not telling you to study anything. Just Google epigenetics, see that it's a real science, and then see why I'm not entertaining this idiot.
No,
We can move on.
that's what I did. It looks like it's a real study, right? Yeah, it says the study of how your behaviors and environment can cause changes that affect the way your genes work, which makes sense. But I think that the thing that's contentious is whether or not simply having a background of trauma and without knowing anything about it, will you experience that
Yes.
trauma? That's
And
the question.
And that's the part that I encourage you to look up, and you can see that that is absolutely a thing. This is not, again, I don't have
No,
to
it's not.
argue with you guys. I don't have to,
But
I'm not going to debate it. Look
I
it up for
agree.
yourself
I
and see
agree
that
with
it's
you.
real, and then that's it.
But it's like how what are the likelihood of someone not knowing their history, right? Like I feel like that's almost impossible.
What are you talking
So-
about?
so
Like
Plenty of
literally
people
less than
don't.
18%
No.
of high school U.S. seniors even know for sure that they were even know that the Civil War was caused by whatever. But by
No. I'm saying like,
can I put it a certain way
is there any
to
Black
make it a little
American?
easier?
Is there any Black American that has no idea about slavery?
So
Nothing.
wait, what
It's
does
not that.
knowledge have to do with genetic propensity? What are you
No,
talking
but
about?
that's what I'm saying is that it's hard to really say that the trauma that's happened here or the trauma that we are observing is solely because of their genetics or because
It doesn't have to solely be.
no, I agree. It doesn't have to
So then
be.
why are we debating that? Like no one's
Hold on.
arguing that. No one said
But
anything like that.
what I'm saying is their trauma can occur from like from their experience and what they've learned or what they've been taught. And so the observation that they have trauma because of their DNA or you look at their DNA, you see that that it has changed, right? It's like the mentality or the observation that their DNA is like helping that. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the contention here that I'm seeing.
No. All I'm saying, and I don't know how we're getting lost here. All I'm saying is because we know epigenetics is a thing, that I'm saying it is very possible for a person to be impacted by the epigenetics, by their genes passed down and them hereditarily, that they could be traumatized by experiencing something like that, right? Like that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying we can guarantee. I'm not saying that we can guarantee for sure that this person has been traumatized or that's happening. You can't guarantee anything. That's not how genes work, right? Just like I can't guarantee that my child has brown eyes if there's whatever. But you can say, hey, if you do discover, for instance, something that might have been somewhat recessive, and you see it, you can say, this is just a gene expression from somebody that was in this lineage. In the same sense, when you do see a child experiencing this, you can say, this is probably epigenetically something that is expressing itself, right? If you don't understand how genes work, or if you don't understand how hereditary works, or if you don't understand what epigenetics is, I can understand why we're having this debate. Other than that, I don't know what the freak is going on.
I don't understand it. So I'm trying to understand it. So my question with what you just said now, Fanatic, is that how do you know that if a child had a traumatic experience and they had a history of like slavery or whatever, and how do you know that their traumatic experience is because of the epigenetics and not because of something they've been taught or something they learned? How do you know?
You can't.
Right.
Exactly. That's why it's not a real fucking science. You cannot take that and put it in a Punnett square and figure out that this is a recessive trait that's come down.
Dream, really quickly, just because you can't know something doesn't mean that there isn't a correlation, and it doesn't mean that like it can't happen, right? It's like me saying that like you can't know for sure, because it's like, for example, nature and nurture, right? Like you can say that children who are born to alcoholic parents are more likely to be alcoholics themselves, right? Like, so how do you know how much of this is nature versus nurture? How do you know, for example, like there can be things like schizophrenia, which can be found within which can be hereditary, right? So then if you find a person who has schizophrenia, right, but the person also indulged in drugs, well, we do know that sometimes drugs can cause schizophrenia. So how do we know that this isn't some genetic propensity versus the drug versus the environment and a response to trauma? How do you know? You can never know. You can never say with 100% certainty you have this because of the fact that because of your genes. You can never know that for anything.
Absolutely.
Right. So then I don't know why we'd be arguing that as if someone was arguing that you could. What I'm saying is that it's not unfounded because of epigenetics.
Right. And my question is, have we found a singular case where this person didn't know anything about their history, didn't know anything, and had an epigenetic history or an epigenetic thing in their DNA, and experienced that trauma without the knowledge?
It's a reversible thing. When I looked at it online, it's reversible. So I don't think every person is necessarily born with it. It doesn't change the DNA sequence. It just changes how your body reads the DNA sequence. So I think maybe you're thinking like you're born with it or something, but I think it can change as you learn more about the trauma.
I think I know what Dream is saying, and maybe you're trying to touch on this, Jade. I'm not sure. I think I know what Dream is trying to say. It's like, do we know of a case? Like, let's say, if it's in terms of slavery, there's certain things that can set people off, right? If that's what you're saying, there's certain things that can set people off. Do we know of a case of a person who has this in their history, right, where epigenetics might have been a factor, but they weren't educated, right? Like they didn't know anything about slavery. They didn't know, black people picking cotton. This is news to me, right? I didn't know anything about that. So like basically he's trying to isolate these things. Like, okay, can we tell that it's not just society, just like us traumatizing people? Like, hey, this is the terrible things that happened to your ancestors, to people who look like you, right? This is we make it something so traumatic. Like just learning the knowledge to be a traumatic experience. Okay, so he's trying to like separate the two. I believe that correct. A Dream, is that what you're trying to do?
Okay,
but I'm saying that I'm not.
So you can understand like what it is, because that question like just it indicates a severe lack of understanding of what the hell we're talking about. When we're talking about genes, and you're talking about what about their education, I feel like I gave a good analogy for it. And if it's still going over you guys' head, I feel like we should just move past epigenetics. Let's just move on to something that's more you guys' speed, please.
No, I understand completely, and I'm just trying to figure it out in totality. But I do understand that, let's say there wasn't, and it's still possible that epigenetics plays a hand in your like re-experiencing your ancestors' trauma. I'm not saying that that's impossible to exist. But then I have a follow-up question to that is like, well, how much does it play? Like, is it 1%, 2%, 3%? And so like And then
I don't know
I
anything
don't
about
have that- I don't
genes.
have that number.
I just see. I heard that.
I know
genes,
you don't have that.
No, I'm saying that like, or don't like from a very basic understanding. Aren't all genes like the human? Like everything about the human experience is like your genes being triggered by your lived experience. Like I don't think that
By
they can exist
environment.
without environment. Like
Sure.
the two. So the say like if you're looking for an example of like what's a person who had an epigenetic experience without an environmental trigger. Like I think that like I don't think that's fundamentally how it works. Like there has to be a trigger with anything.
I
We
know,
don't always
and
know
I'm
what that trigger is, but like
I
that's
know
what
that,
genes do. They're triggers.
but when you have epigenetics, and then the trigger is something that is not taught to you. Is what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Is that possible? I'm not saying that epigenetics doesn't have a hand. I'm just asking if it's possible that you don't know anything about slavery and can
I
still
don't
get
have the
triggered.
depth to have that conversation.
That's what I
Yeah,
just want to know. I'm
phobia.
not denying epigenetics. I'm just
Phobia.
asking a question.
Just consider a phobia. These are ingrained things in our genes that are changed over time through traumas that our ancestors had that make us afraid of the dark, afraid of cats, afraid of enclosed spaces. You need a trigger to trigger that. But you have a phobia. You may not have run across it yet, but it's not something that's
Yeah,
rational.
that's
It's not your
right.
brain.
Phobias
I
are
don't
not
know.
phobias are not genetic. Phobias are if you want to use a term in psychology, it's one of those universal instincts that we all have. We fear the dark because we don't know what's there. We fear the unknown. We fear spiders because we know that they have venom. We don't know what spider is more venomous than the other one. Same thing with snakes. Same thing with being in the water. You don't know where the drop off is if you can't see through the water. That has nothing to do with genetics. That's all.
Everything. It's
That's
still
all.
genetics.
It's
That's
genetics.
all.
It's genetics of
That's all
self-preservation.
psychology.
I was about to say humans are humans are afraid of things because fear and like being able to recognize patterns helps you to survive. That's still genes expressing. But
No,
yeah.
Right,
we're,
but
we're getting really,
that's a
really, we're
universal.
getting really far from
but
the thing.
DeAndre's point is that that's a universal thing, not just
Sure, but it's still
It's
genes.
called-
He
it's
said
Hey,
it
called-
it
wasn't
is universal. That is a
What-
human survival instinct.
absolutely, yeah.
It
It's
would be the
called
same thing if you
universal
guys look at
universal
things
consciousness.
like certain. There's an example of like little like baby crows that are born, and if you like, it was in this movie I watched, but it's a known phenomenon. It's where like little babies are born, and there's like they do a shadow that imitates an eagle swooping over their heads, and they're brand new babies, and automatically they're afraid. Now they've never had any experiences with eagles or anything like that. They're brand new into the world, yet they already have some of these instincts. Like we want to say that everything is environment, but there's a lot of things that are genetic that we just inherit, right? Or look at some of the twin studies that they did, where they had people who were born and got mixed up. There was one where these young boys, they had gotten mixed up at birth in the hospital, and so they were identical twins, and they both went with different families. And the two identical twins lived more similarly to each other. One of them was like particularly more good at like sports and so on and so forth. His twin brother that looked exactly like him was also really good at sports, but his other sibling was not. The other one was like particularly scholastically solid, whereas his identical twin, where his identical twin was, but the person he was living with, because they just thought, oh, this is my brother, but in reality they weren't. My point being, the pairs of twins, they genetically seem like that propensity caused them to like exhibit things that was way more in line with each other. So I think in the same sense, you can see these kinds of things happening. We know that this we know this happens. So I don't know why we would deny this happen, that being something that like indicates genetic propensities. And so this same sort of genetic propensity could express itself even across generations through epigenetics. I don't understand why that would be a hard concept to grasp.
I think we should maybe move on from this particular point.
Yeah. For that, I don't want you to think I'm denying it.
Dark.
I don't want you to think I'm denying it. I was just asking questions.
Gotcha.
Go ahead, Bam. You want one last thing?
Yeah, I wanted to bring us back.
Okay.
Yeah, so like to completely honest, I have like none of us have any way of knowing if that this girl is having that type of response. If I had to think of the simplistic answer, likely she is growing up in an environment where she's like learning about her history, learning about Black people, and she is having like troubling experiences, remembering that something effed up happened to her while she was young, and like in order to file a lawsuit, it has to be on some merit. What are you suing for? So they probably went the angle of of trauma, because it's a really simple way of filing a lawsuit. It's just an easy explanation. But I don't think that's the important part. I think the rest of this conversation is questioning whether or not the school should be at fault for even creating this experience in the first place. And that seems to be where people disagree. Some Kai, Fanatic, I think even Jay Cooks was leaning towards the angle of this shouldn't be a thing. The school shouldn't be allowed to create these type of experiences. Okay, never mind. I'm wrong. Let me not speak for you.
Permission slip. I just said a permission slip.
Oh, right. You did say it. You were very specific. Yeah. I had this experience. I didn't find it very educational, personally, but I understand. I understand the value. Like there are human beings. There are people who do find the hands-on experience. Like they do get more from a hands-on experience versus what you could tell them. Like you can show me better than you can tell me. And I know you're not showing them the actual the nitty-gritty of slavery, which
and I think
you
that's
wouldn't
the
want to experience
problem.
You can take them to
That's
a
exactly the
museum.
problem.
Right.
But I mean, I don't think you need to experience the full capacity of slavery.
And how can you understand it?
Because of empathy and imagination. I mean,
No,
how else
but
do you
that's
understand anything
exactly,
you've never experienced? What
that was the
kind of
whole point
question
that
is
I
that?
brought up from the very beginning. Like, wouldn't that then palliate the experience? If you sit here and, for example,
If you don't educate her correctly, yes, I agree.
Well, no, I'm exactly, and this is what I would be calling that miseducation. Obviously, if you show someone an example of like, hey, I'm trying to show you the abuse that I went through, right? And say you're trying to like demonstrate some sort of verbal abuse, and it's like, yeah, like this person was incredibly toxic and demeaning and so on and so forth. And it's like, okay, for example, what's a nickname that you don't really like? Well, I don't like, my name is Nick, and I don't like when people call me, I don't like people, I mean, my name is Nicholas, and I don't like when people call me Nick. And it's like, okay, well, if I called you Nick and you didn't like being called Nick, that would give you a good example of what it feels like to be called the N-word. And it's like, no, what you're doing now is you're instilling this value into this person. Like, I mean, you're trying to say that this is what this feels like, and it's palliating it, right? Because now they're saying, oh, it's just me being, it's a mild annoyance. That's what you're describing to me. It's a mild annoyance. And I think when you do that to children and you say, we're going to simulate slavery, or we're going to show you what the slaves went through, and all you do is have them picking cotton, it's like, so basically you're just saying that the slaves were people who did agricultural work. Well, my mom understands that because she tells me she can't stand getting up in the morning to go to work all the time. So basically my mom is a slave. So that's why I'm saying you're palliating the experience. And I don't think you could possibly contextualize for freaking elementary school kids the brutality, the loss of the ownership, the buck breaking, the raping, all of those things. You can't possibly contextualize those. So all you're doing is putting them through an exercise that's going to convince them that slavery is not as bad. We've seen these efforts already being done in Texas, where they start trying to refer to slaves as migrant workers. And in my opinion, this seemed like this would be the equivalent. Please explain to me where these two would be different.
I think when I think you drop a valid point. Maybe elementary is not the year to do this. Maybe it's high school, so they can have maybe when they have a better understanding of when they become more empathetic. I'm not sure, but I do think that the responsibility is on the teachers and the parents, both of them, to give a holistic viewpoint about picking cotton. Like if I was a teacher and I was doing this field trip, I would from the jump tell them that you are not experiencing what slaves have went through. This is like 0.0001% of what they had to go through. And so
perfect. If that's the case, then why do it at all?
Yeah.
Why do it at all? What does it actually accomplish? You can literally read about, oh, hey, they picked cotton, couched within the context of, and they were owned and beaten and enslaved, and cattle, and so on and so forth. But like, what does the actual act of picking the cotton do besides palliate?
Because like you could say that my experience going to Ghana and going to the last bath and having a pleasant wash over my body where I wasn't in chains and I didn't experience even 1% of their pain. You could say that I palliated, but it didn't. Like I used my imagination. I was like, damn, this was their last bath. Like, this is horrible. Even though I'm it was a pleasant thing for me. It
Yes,
was.
but those are totally different
I understand.
experiences.
I understand.
So
But
then
what
why are
I'm
you bringing that up if it's not the same thing at all? Because like the difference between
the
this
category,
thing,
the category is the same. The category you're
it's
talking
not
about.
even remotely close to the same category.
I'm
Because like
trying.
in one, you're going to a space where you're just saying, "Hey, these are the locations where these things happen," and having the things described to them, right? Like that's one thing, but it's a total different thing. It's a total different thing to be reductive enough to try to simulate like this is what the slaves went through this action. There's a total different. You don't get how those two things are wildly
I
different.
see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. So in your mind, it would be different if they didn't just go to a random cotton picking plantation, but if they actually went to a real historical plantation where slaves did pick cotton and then pick cotton, it would be different then.
Sure, I would say visiting the locations pretty much period. I don't think is going to achieve anything. Unless, for example, I remember inside of the African American History Museum in DC, they have a portion where like they had there was a place where you could go into the plantations and they could show you this was the size and scope of the plant, like this is the size and scope of the sleeping quarters, and you could see where it's like a very 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 tiny area and they're like in 16 people slept in this one place, right? Like that is obviously telling because all you can do is imagine, like, okay, this is the space and so on and so forth. There's no way you can dismiss what this is, right? Like it's as transparent as possible. But that's wildly different than, hey, whatever the freak we've been talking about. That's wildly different than doing the task that was their job, that was the industry that they funded, and trying to explain that as if this is the equivalent when it's not. Like those two things are wildly different.
I think
Right, and I would
the
agree
bigger
with
issue
that.
with that is I think the bigger issue is when you're dealing with small children, especially small children that aren't yours. It's something really important is any experience you have, like it can't be troubling. It by definition can't be hard. It can't be difficult because you're doing it with other people's children. So like I don't think they have to be equivalent. But the fact that like if the children are out there and they're getting tired and they're like if they're actually having like even a small amount of difficulty, like, oh, my fingers hurt. If a parent hears about that, like, oh, my children actually pick cotton until their fingers hurt, then that teacher's like losing their job and probably going to jail. Like, so I think that's the bigger issue. But I don't think you have to do equivalence things. Like, for example, if oh god, I hate using Herschel Walker because this man is literally like the anti-Black Christ right now. But Herschel Walker, allegedly used to do 2,000 push-ups and sit-ups every morning. And if someone told you, okay, you, layman, do 200 push-ups, and you go through 200 push-ups, and you say, now imagine doing 10 times that every single day with no water, no sleep. Like, even though you didn't do the exact thing, I think that you can create the scenario, like you can go through enough where you can create the scenario where you do have some level of empathy. Obviously, you can't
Absolutely,
recognize.
but simply just going to a cotton field and picking a little bit of cotton in a way that's not strenuous, that doesn't hurt your hands, that doesn't deal with any of the other atrocities is clearly not even remotely close to that. The thing is, if you do the 200 like push-ups as an out of shape man, you very quickly realize how absolutely strenuous it is as your body starts breaking down and your muscles can't keep up anymore and your body is shaking and all that nonsense. You start getting a scope of, wow, this is really damaging. Wow, this is really toxic. Wow, this is painful. And now I understand, like, I mean, the idea of doing this to an even higher degree is crazy. That's where you get that from. But again, simply just saying, yeah, we're going to pick cotton and like this is going to be the same simulation is just not. Like, that's not it. It's impossible. First off, let's just say this simply. When you're dealing with elementary kids, there is not a possible way to ever do anything that would be remotely close to simulating it in a way that they would be able to compare it within our education system, right? Because if you're doing anything that's going to be painful or injurious to the kids, it's immediately not legal, right? If you're going to be doing something where you're like simulating any sort of like raping or whipping or any of those kinds of things, it's going to be immediately deemed inappropriate, right? So there is no way to contextualize this. This is why I'm saying there is no example you're going to come up with. Whereas it's an entirely different thing what he's talking about, where he's an adult and they're talking about the atrocities. They're showing you whatever. You get the point.
I agree.
I just very quickly, Smooth, thank you for the $5 donation. And they say, going back to our previous discussion, an example of epigenetics would be a pregnant woman being abused leads to more testosterone in her baby. It's not about literal trauma. It's their opinion. I gotta admit, I don't know much about the subject, so that's why I wasn't commenting on it, epigenetics. So I'll leave it there. But thank you for that, and yeah, we'll read donations, $5 and up on stream. So like, if you guys have something you want to say at a panel, right, for $5 up, use our PayPal button to do that, or maybe gift bits, 500 or sorry, yeah, 500 bits or so. And we'll read that. Okay.
And if you guys want me to steel man your arguments, you can always donate to me, and I'll steel man it. You trust me. In my PayPal, bro. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. So
But yeah, picking 40 to
$5.
60 pounds of like cotton a day is ridiculous, and you, like I said, you could never do anything to children that would be legal that could like help them empathize or understand.
Right.
So
We're
what
not
will
going
be
to
the
jail.
point in doing it then?
Exactly.
But that's why I came in with agreeing with you again.
Um,
But I went to I visited plantation. Like I said, I did this. I do think there is value in visiting plantations. But my family lives on an old plantation. Like we bought the land that we were owned on. I think that there's like there is a history, and there is like value to knowing that, like, oh, okay, like this wasn't real. This wasn't in that other far away land. This was that funny building down the street. At least for me. Like these are the plantations are around you. These things, are happening in your neighborhood.
So fuck. What was I gonna say? Shit, I actually lost it. Well, so I guess, yeah, what Bam said previously, right? It was a while ago. I think he was actually narrowing down on like the heart of this, and it's where I wanted to go to, is whether like the school is actually liable. Now I agree that the assignment was not like the best. Like I wouldn't, like I said, I wouldn't have done this. I would have like, oh, let's rethink, let's back up. Are you sure? Right? This sounds like something white people came up with. I'm just saying. It sounds like something a white person came up with. But and they're like, this is gonna be great. But like, should they be necessarily liable because a kid had a panic attack for activity that she wasn't actually even a part of, that she witnessed? I think if we were looking in other areas, that we would say no. That like it doesn't.
Like I said earlier, I think it's a very, very weak case. But because of the way our political environment is right now, I think that there would be pressure politically for them to actually be charged with something, charged liable. Me personally, I can't find anything in this case that would indicate to me that the school should be held liable for anything. Because again, she didn't participate. As a matter of fact, in those particular days, her mother could have kept her at home if she didn't want her to go.
I think
mean,
I was gonna
go
say,
ahead.
like, if there was an instance of like when I was in elementary school, even up to high school, before I was 18, you had to sign a permission slip to go,
Yeah.
and it had to be parent signed. And of course, I mean, I never actually had my mom sign anything. I just forged her signature, but that's because I know my mom's okay with everything, and I was okay with everything. So, but if her mom signed off or something like that, then I there's no way for the school to be liable. Like, how are you gonna go and blame the school for something that you knew was gonna happen?
Yeah,
Like,
that's
unless the field trip form did not mention anything about picking cotton. That's the only way that I see
another
it.
good point. Those
Well, it wasn't a
those
field trip, wasn't
permissions.
it? I thought it was at the school.
It was at the
Yeah,
school.
they planted.
Wait, they had
after
cotton at the school?
Yeah,
After
Yeah.
They
school
set it
field
up
trip
at the school.
After
Oh,
school
so they
field trips
brought
actually
plants
happened
of
though.
cotton. Okay.
I went to several after school field trips because we just didn't have the time of day in order to do the event during the class. So, for example, my art class, we went
Not
on
after school, at the school.
Oh, at school, I've had
Yes.
those too. Um, but that goes to what you said earlier about the permission slips. That is really the case here because the reasoning behind getting those permission slips signed is to waive liability for the school in case something happens. So if the mother signed it, then she's already lost the case.
She doesn't, but you don't have to sign anything if something is happening on campus.
Yeah, I was gonna
Right.
say, did they
Actually, you
even need
do.
to make a permission slip if it
For
was
sex
at the
education.
school?
For
Well,
sex education, you
sex
need
education
permission.
is about the only exception that I'm aware of. Can you think
Yeah.
of any others?
This would be a good one.
It should be.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
They,
and-
okay, they were
I don't
just
even think
walking out to the garden.
But this
and
is not
that-
even
and
something
that
where I
was-
feel like you
We have to
should
do that.
do. It's just the exercise shouldn't be done. Period. I remember me being in school, being raised with hyper religious parents. They wouldn't even let me do. I didn't have to do like I remember it was around Christmas time, and there was like this project, and it was like we had to color in Santa and do some whatever. I was in the first grade, and we had a volunteer mom that day, and they were like trying to make me do this thing, and I already knew like my mom didn't want me doing nothing with Santa. And when the teacher was handing out all of the different papers to everyone, she told me, "Hey, you don't have to do this assignment, so on and so forth." So when the helper lady is going around, and she's like telling everyone, like helping people with the work, so she was telling me, like, "Okay, you gotta do this." I'm like, "No, I don't have to do this." And she was just like, "Yeah, but you have to. It's what the teacher is assigning." I'm like, "No, I don't have to do this." But she said I don't have to do it. She's like, "No, everyone's doing this. This is the assignment." And I'm like, "No, I don't have to do it." And so finally the teacher walks up and is like, "Oh, yeah, no. He's not doing this." Because had I done it, my mama was not the type to play. She would have went freaking ham, right? So you already do have influence in telling your children what they can and can't do, but it has to be something that you know is going to happen. And my mom, being the mother that she was, decided, hey, if this is around this time, this is around Christmas time, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let you know now my child will not be participating in anything Halloween related. My child will not be participating in anything Christmas related, so on and so forth. So you can do that. But if you don't even know that they're about to be teaching this kind of thing, yeah, I can understand. Like,
We used to have parents whose kids would get their kids opted out of round earth stuff and like creationism
What?
stuff, like evolution. Like parents would like, oh yeah, like if you're dealing with anything related to evolution, like my kid gets to go to a different class during this section of science. They used to be a thing.
They did that?
Round
How old
Earth,
are-
though?
Wait,
For real?
wait. Your
Yeah.
classmates, Bam?
Yeah, that was a
How
real
old
thing.
are you, Bam? 27?
he's also
Damn.
in Texas.
That's wild.
Yeah, I mean, like
Oh,
you can opt out. You
that
can opt
makes
out a lot of stuff for religious reasons.
So,
So wild.
let's say there wasn't a permission slip. I don't know. The article didn't mention it, so that's gonna.
I'm reading something that says the suit says that there was not a permission form and that parents were not informed of this project,
Okay. Right.
according to the lawsuit.
So,
They're gonna settle. They're gonna have to.
They're definitely liable.
Yeah.
Because
But-
at
I
that
agree.
point,
But
you could
liable
just
for
basically
what
indoctrinate
exactly?
children.
Liable for
school is indoctrination. Like what? Like I don't know. Like
It
that's
is.
you're teaching them something, and
Yeah.
you're giving them a point of view. That's kind of just how that works. But
racial insensitivity.
If they followed it through to the end, the school would probably win. But this is gonna end up being a settlement for some level of money to get rid
It's
of it.
not going to.
Oh, I mean, to, like, yeah, to make it go away, but-
No, this is gonna be a settlement.
Like,
I
think
think-
have money. They're run by the federal government, so they're gonna fight it until the end because the school does not.
Do you
have
know the
money to
federal
give it
government?
away.
The federal government settles all types of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. My
Not
sister,
costs-
not when it comes to us.
The reason
You-
the
no,
reason
they
Actually,
do.
a
You
school
can look
is
at
local
my
government.
DeAndre, the reason
my sister sued the school 3 times. You can even look up those lawsuits. They're on the internet. She sued the school district 3 times and won all 3 of those lawsuits for large, like high 6 figures. So there are
Yeah,
plenty of
but
times where they
what
recognize
issue
that, hey, we
would
had better not. We better settle so that we don't end up losing a lot more money. So there's no guarantee
Yeah.
they won't settle.
settling
I
just
don't see this
the
as
reason
a
they
issue
settle is
too.
to save money. Like the federal government, and I would imagine you think that they
These are
wouldn't want
school
to lose.
governments.
This is
These
a
are
school system. It's
governments.
gonna be a city.
No,
or
Yeah,
county.
I'm
so-
using his framework to even combat his logic. So even the federal government, you would imagine they don't want to lose money if they don't have to. So they're gonna settle, even if they think they're not gonna. Even if they think they're gonna win, they would still settle to save the money. You understand that, right?
We must be talking about 2 different federal governments because the one that I see loves spending money.
But when you're talking about schools, by the way, you're not talking about the federal government. You're talking about the state government, because the vast majority of funding, number one, goes through the schools. Number two, schools are state-ran institutions, except for when you start talking about even colleges. So yeah, no. This is not a federal thing. There's no federal government being involved here. It's just the state. What the hell are we talking about?
Do you think they should whether okay, so if a person settles a case, right? Like, we can understand that that doesn't necessarily mean they're guilty, right? People like settle things all the time. Like celebrities will settle a case. Someone takes a case with them, like, I don't have to go through court for this. Like, you want a bit of money, you want it to go away, fine. Like, just do it, right? Like, it's just easier than like getting my name dragged into the mud for something that I didn't actually do. Or, like, this is the thing that happens. Just because you settle doesn't mean you're guilty. Do you think that, like, in your opinion, that the school should have to pay, right? That it was something so egregious. Now I think no one here is like defending the project itself. No one here is saying like this was a great idea. All right, fine, but like within a school, like all kinds of things that happen that aren't amazing, right? Like your kid gets into a fucking fight, right? And it's not like your kid gets in a fight every day, but today your kid got into a fight, got banged up. Should the school necessarily be sued because of that? Like, oh, well, it's not a safe environment for the child. Well, but kids fight all the time. It'd be one thing if they're being picked on constantly and like had no safety in the school. That's one thing. But it's a thing that happens. So, like, for this specific project, and again, where she did not participate, they didn't force her to do anything. She just watched it. And now, like, oh, so such incredible mental distress. I still don't fucking buy that shit, right? But whatever. Like, should the school have to, in your opinion, if you're the one judging this, should the school have to pay?
Prime, I'll be 100% honest, right? Look, all trolls aside, like, I wanted to do the Black Solidarity thing, but I'm just be as honest as I can possibly be. Ain't no way in hell the school should be responsible for anything outlandish. But I'll tell you what they can do. I'll tell you what they can do. Simply on the idea that there is some distress and all of that, they can just pay for their child's psychology. Something very, very minor, right? The child gets to go to a psychologist. So, and like almost like a penitence for you guys putting up this ridiculous and I'm not going to say that word, ridiculous thing, right? Problem solved. That's it.
Yeah,
It's probably gonna be some pain and suffering on top of it. Like I
I
said,
don't
that
see them needing
Sure.
to do that at all, because again, it goes down to the point that she did not participate in it.
It doesn't
It-
matter.
And it
She was there.
was,
She watched it.
it was, I mean, me personally think it's a horrible idea. I have no problem with the school doing it. I think it's stupid. But I mean, it's very similar to the cases where we have a lot of people making complaints about the issue of in New York and California, where their kids are having to be read books by people who are in drag and all of that crap. And this
we
is
haven't
very
read nothing like
similar.
that.
This is very similar in this particular case. Your kids don't have to participate. They don't even have to be on campus when it happens. Of course, there's the idea of whether or not they knew that it was going on or not. I don't see that it to be something so painful that the school has to be held has to pay something. I actually agree with Fanatic on this one. It's very minor to pay for 7 months or 7 sessions of psychology, however much they come to terms with for that. I mean, you get those programs at your job for the first 7 sessions are usually free if you go on the employee assistant programs and stuff like that. So I think that should probably be it.
I think we should have the empathy of acknowledging the sensitivity of very small children. Like, they haven't had the experience enough to build their tough skin. So there, anything very that you, like, us as adults now, like, I can't even imagine. Like, yeah, because we have this current experience of with our tough skin being built, but very small. Like, I work with small children as an after school program teacher. Like, the smallest thing is gonna make the children cry and have whatever panic attack. Like, not being included at a lunch table Like that made one of the students cry. Like they were including me at the lunch table, but it's not like the people at the lunch table was doing it intentionally or whatever. And so like the littlest thing, like, so I don't know how Prime can't imagine a black girl's gonna feel like I would be upset from watching like cotton picking, because I mean, like, because they're gonna cry for a way less.
So before I respond to that, because I again more thoughts on this. Jade, what are your thoughts? If you were the one judging this, how would you rule?
I would say that the school is responsible, because it wasn't like a field trip where a permission slip was required. It kind of just happened at the school and nobody was made aware of it. And so the kid might have stumbled upon it, or the class was just brought out to the garden and then this activity took place. Nobody knew it was going to happen. And like I mentioned before, like I was taught about things like this at a young age from my mom, and so the same thing could happen with the girl. And it was to a point where like for like 2 or 3 years of my life I was consistently having nightmares about the KKK, and I think this could be something similar in that girl situation. Just even seeing it, not participating, just triggered her in some way that she wasn't prepared for. She didn't know what was going to happen, so she couldn't like stay in the classroom. There was like nothing that could have prepared her for that. So I do think the school is responsible, and the school should pay.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what about? Oh, you want Jade? We'll hear from.
No, I agree with Jade. I think it's discriminatory. It shows incompetence from the school. Obviously, some money has to come up.
Y'all city slicker soft.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but
It's not about that. That we're again like D1
Children
was
are
saying,
soft.
these are children, right?
Yup.
This woman clearly saw some behavior change in her child enough that she felt the need to sue the school. Who goes through that?
No,
He wants a
no,
check.
no, no.
I'm,
Like,
again,
to
I'm
get
not, and
money,
I'm not mad
people
at
do
that.
all that all the time. Like what? I don't think it's clearly because it hasn't been adjudicated at all, right?
I'm
so
team
like
mom. I hope
clearly,
she wins.
you could say anything, right? You could say you got emotional distress or fucking anything. And so, what I was gonna ask about this, okay, so if this is the path we want to go down, and I'm glad Fnatic said what he said before, right? That like on his personal opinion, that they shouldn't be held liable, right? But like, the Chinese built the railroads in this country in brutal conditions.
So did the niggas. Let's be clear.
Sure,
the
sure.
niggas in the South. You know what I'm saying? I hate that we always associate with the Chinese and
Uh,
dismiss the fact that the niggas was the one that were first responsible for doing it in the South, and then the Chinese, as well as niggas, was doing it over there in the West. Let's make sure that we remember that.
Gotcha.
I don't know why we
gotcha.
always try to dismiss the black pain. Continue.
I apologize.
That's that
All
New
right.
York in him.
But no, all right, and like in the West, but like they did it under goddamn brutal conditions, right? Racist conditions, where people and they died, right? Because the working conditions were so bad, it was terrible, and it happened over a very long period of time. Okay, so a Chinese-born American, or American-born Chinese person, whatever. It learns about this, right? A young boy learns about this, and then the school has a trip where like we're going to learn about civics, kids, right? Like not civics, or civil infrastructure. And this is an example of a railroad being built, and then they remember the stories that their parents told them, and then they get triggered. Should the school have to pay for that?
Well, do you see how you brought up the example of a trip, and by trip they would have to necessarily sign a field trip form? So yeah,
Okay,
in the case of a
That's point. I'm sure he could.
No, I think that's our main point here is that there is no knowledge of this thing happening.
I don't think that's the main
And with
point
no-
that everyone is saying. I don't think
I
that's
think-
what everyone is. I think
Jade,
that's
is
part
that
of
not
it.
a fundamental? It's a fundamental point. It may not be the main, but the
The
fundamental
activity
point
is the crux of the problem.
Yeah, the activity is a problem, but but if your parent was okay with the activity, there's no way that you can sue, right, Jay?
Yes,
if they
I
approve,
agree.
yeah.
Right. So the most fundamental point is that there is no permission for this to happen and no knowledge of it happening.
Okay.
So
okay,
if there's
okay.
knowledge and permission, that it's okay. So
Second.
that would always occur in a trip.
Okay, so okay, sorry, never mind. Let me narrow it
No.
for you.
Prime, do not change the point. Just go ahead and just say, assuming ignoring that
There's a
single
railroad that
factor of
runs
it.
through the school, like
Yeah,
like right
Yeah,
beside the school.
they set
It's right
they
there.
set
We can
something
get to
up.
the point. Get okay. Removing the permission slip portion of it. If that happened, Lord have mercy.
Right,
It's just-
removing permission, then yeah, they have a lot. And if there was no permission and this child went to the trip, then yes, that child that the school is liable for the trauma.
No. He's saying remove the issue of permission one way or the other. Yeah. We're taking that off the table, right?
So there
we're
is
pretending-
permission.
No, sure, whatever. Like the point is, we're taking permission slips like off this table whatsoever. They're not even part of the conversation. Like we're just focusing on the trauma itself, right? Of like or look, it happened on school grounds, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. We're focusing
You
on the
obviously
act.
understand this, right?
Yeah.
Like okay, then I'll give just both points. Like if there's no permission, then they're liable. If there is permission, they're not liable. It's simple.
Okay.
Lord, you can't
What
do it.
about
That's
yeah?
crazy.
What about the rest of you? Like, do you think that a person of Chinese descent, having learned about all this, maybe like literally descended from peoples who had like they lost people in their family, to our railroad system, and then on school they bring in an engineer and they're like, well, this is how we build a railroad. Like, as the kid has some sort of panic attack, should the school be liable in that case?
Yeah. Again,
A little bit different. There's a different specificity in this situation where this primarily ran an entire portion of this country.
Oh.
All of the
Right,
South was making money
okay.
off of
Okay. What
cotton.
about?
Well, so did
Let's
railroads.
change the example. What if we dealing with a Jewish kid and the school shows the boy in the striped pajamas?
That's another one. Those
Yeah.
are specific.
And then they entered a gas chamber, an example of a gas chamber.
No,
Oh, sure. There's a perfect example. Do y'all not understand that? Like that you could see like some kid being like OD traumatized if they're going into a freaking school for a Jewish kid, or for, they're showing them, they're teaching them about Anne Frank, like as you know they do all the rest of like that's in every piece of curriculum. They spend more time talking about the Jews in our education system than we do talking about the slave trade, just so that we're clear there.
I hear you.
So if that happened, and a kid was traumatized because they like visited some or not even visited a museum, they maybe brought an exhibit to the school that had to do with like gas chambers or something, and they had some kids go through there, nobody would be batting an eye at the idea of like, yo, that could have been traumatizing as hell.
Exactly.
I would be. That's what
Right.
I'm saying. I would be.
Yeah,
Like,
so then this kid should get paid. Thank you guys for convincing me. You're 100% right. They better cut that check.
Exactly, fanatic. Good
No.
job.
No,
Welcome
no.
to the side.
no,
Again,
fuck
I'm proud of the
this.
kid. I'm proud of the kid being paid. Like I said, I don't know if it's legit, but I don't care if it's legit. That's my thing.
Yep,
I'm like,
send that
you
message.
shouldn't have did it. That, like you put yourself in a dumb position.
No.
Yes,
But no,
Bam, I
no.
agree with
But no,
that.
then that's different. That's different. Saying that the school did a dumb thing. Schools do dumb things. Organizations
So you
do
pay.
dumb
You know
things
what?
all the time. It's whether they're actually damaging, right? And significant, at least,
I don't care.
and something that is reasonable for them to try to avoid, right? Like emotionally traumatizing a kid who did not participate.
That's up
Who
to a
did not
therapist.
participate.
That's up to
who
a
simply
therapist.
Witness.
observed it, right?
It's not up
You
to
witnessed it. Yeah, that's enough.
Seeing it can be enough.
So again,
In this case, it's up to a
so hold on.
therapist.
So again, Chinese kid, answer that. Chinese kid, they do an example on school grounds, whatever, of building a railroad, right? This is how we build a railroad. This is how we built the tracks. Should they get paid if the kid has a panic attack? Is it reasonable for the school to try to avoid like every possible individual trial? Because we got a lot of that in the past, and I feel like this is exactly what the PCNF, right? Of what you guys accuse of us progressives of being snowflakes of. Like this is it. This is what we're accused of, and I'm saying no. The school should not have to pay for that.
I'm proud of you in this moment.
I don't-
You have redeemed yourself for the moment.
I don't think this is a left or right issue. I mean, I think like there's a bunch of conservative Jews that would feel the same way.
I really do think it depends though. Like I think that I think a school has to have some level of leeway to educate on the issue without like I think I don't want to live in the world of trigger warnings. I think Twitter's I think that's fine. Like I think there's safe spaces should exist, But I don't
Oh,
think
no.
we should create a world where like everything has to be a trigger warning. Like we don't know who this might negatively impact, because there are going to be negative and like potentially like things that people have bad experiences with that are going to come up in school or whatever. Like
I
I
can
have a
name
question.
some
I have a question.
traumas. One second. I can name some traumas that most people aren't even aware of, right? Some like serious generational traumas, things that happened. I'm sure we could come up with something that happened to Native American brothers and sisters that was absolutely serious. I mean, we fucking ethnically cleansed them in this country, right? So you can imagine some terrible shit happened to them that they passed down through stories. But should necessarily a school like have to know all these types of generational traumas and avoid all of them when like even if it's an ill-advised thing, like especially if the kid doesn't participate, like should that be a thing? I don't know.
I don't think about
think
all of them,
anyone
but I think it's finding the middle ground of like what's the big ones, what's the obvious f ups. Like let's say on Halloween day at school, like if the teacher decided to go full native garb, like had on the headdress and like like did like went full out in class, is like we're learning about Native Americans, kids. Or what was this? And the math teacher with the Sokotoa thing. Like
Yeah.
I think we could call stuff like hold on, this is pretty lame.
That's
Like you might
different.
get in trouble for this.
That's
This is
different.
disrespectful.
That is
I don't-
different. That is different. That is
I
different.
don't even
ma'am.
I don't think they need to be avoided like what you were saying. Like I think just sending an email to a parent prior, like, hey, heads up, we're going to talk about Thanksgiving or Native Americans, or we're about to talk about slavery, or we're about to talk about the Holocaust. Just letting the parents know. I don't think these topics need to be completely avoided in class because the kids should learn about this. But if you're going to do something to that extent where you want to recreate or simulate something that's tied to their trauma, that needs to be known.
It's all of
100%,
this is
Jake.
history. Everything that we're talking about is history. Like to say that a school shouldn't be responsible for what they're teaching, that's ridiculous.
But I think like I said, it's just finding that threshold. You like the point I think Prime is getting at. You can always say something that's triggering to someone, and it's wondering what's reasonable and what's unreasonable, and how do we like differentiate between the two? Do you know it when you see it?
I think it's pretty easy. Like anything slavery type. You know what I'm saying?
But here's the thing. I disagree with this project. I'll say it again and again. I would never have approved this project. Never, ever, ever. This was obviously a bad idea. However, saying that and believing that, I still think it has some educational value, right? You can see the thread line as to where they were going. The example you gave, Bam, where the teacher comes in and like doing like tomahawk chops and the whatnot with a feather on their head, right? Saying like, "Oh, I'll be teaching them about Native Americans." Nah, I'm like, nah, like that doesn't have an educational value. You're not actually, you're not even teaching them how Native Americans acted, right? You're teaching them a caricature of what you think Native Americans were doing in the past. It's like that doesn't have an educated value.
That sounds equivalent to the situation now. The cotton picking.
Hold on, how? Like, but
that's not how cotton picking worked. You didn't go out at 2:30, after we go to the bathroom and get a little water break.
No, that's not
pick
the
cotton
same.
For 10 minutes. That's a caricature.
This is literally the action. This is the action that was being done, right? People did have to do this under the hot sun. Yeah, that's a thing that happened. But like, doing like dancing around, doing like a war. I don't even like pantomime this shit, right? That'll get me in trouble. But like dancing around a fire, pretending to dance around a fire, doing like a war chant, right? Doing tomahawk chops, right? Pretending like to be a Native American that you saw in a fucking cartoon. No, those things aren't the same. I'm sorry, those aren't the same. So I would say that if it has some educational value, that would be the difference.
Who would decide that? A judge?
Well, we can adjudicate that.
No, the people who decide that would be the school board, and the parents decide that by deciding whether or not they're sending their kids to that school or not.
I'm fine with it. We're saying you know it when you see it, But like I don't know if we're.
I mean,
I don't know if you consider hard
honestly,
line.
here's the thing. I remember way back in the day. I don't know if they still do it, but I remember way back in the day when every single year before we even start classes, we'd have to get this stupid little white student handbook that had all of the school's rules and regulations and what the curriculum is and what they teach about. And at the very back of it is we're going to let the permission take your picture or put it in the newspaper, blah blah blah. Your parents got to sign on this and sign on this to consent to being taught this whatever it is they're teaching, and you give that slip back to them within the first 2 weeks of the school. If you don't do that, then you can't attend. Then you can't attend that school.
Yeah, but
But
those things aren't exhaustive. So it's not like you can tell them this is the general way, this is the general subject that we'll be going over. You're not going to go over every individual field trip. You're not, because a lot of those things aren't even decided. They still are like contingent on specific funding, which can come literally in the middle of the year. Like you're not going to be able to determine specific, like there's just too many changes. It's not an exhaustive list. Even if they did do that thing, they probably weren't going to include the specific bit of information about exactly what our classroom would be doing with this project. That doesn't apply here.
yeah, but the thing
And I
is,
feel like you're gonna get into
with,
like the LGBT stuff. Like I feel like this is the one thing, because if we do put it to a vote for parents, there's a lot of parents that they're pissed that the teacher decided to wear a rainbow shirt, even if they did nothing else with it.
the parents aren't pissed about them wearing rainbow shirts. The parents are pissed about them having drag queens come in there and read books to their kids.
That hasn't happened at
that's
school though.
correct.
That only happened at
Like
libraries.
No,
like
there was
volunteers.
they actually had a video that just came out in New York where there's a drag queen sitting in a chair with kids in the classroom coming there to talk to him about why he's drag.
Nah, you got to show me that. That was at a library, like all the rest of the drag queen story
I'll
hours.
show
But
you
if
the
that
video.
were true,
That
do you
one
believe it
was
needs a
just
permission slip?
that one was just recent. That
Abso-freaking-lutely.
that was like last week. But yeah, it does need a permission slip because parents need to consent to whether or not they want their kids to go to that type of stuff. Just like there was one thing where I think it was California. I don't think it was a school field trip, but they had parents were bringing their kids to drag clubs to go watch a drag show. Well, at that particular instance, the parents have every right to do whatever they want to. But if the school was going to go make that
No,
decision,
that's child abuse.
definitely need to have a permission slip to allow the parent to make that decision or not.
Okay. All right. So I guess we're a bit out of impasse here. But yeah, interesting
was
conversation.
fun.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting conversation.
I don't think they should have to pay on the bottom line because it seems pretty frivolous, and they should probably get the kids some mental help and never do it again without handing out a permission slip. Just
that
for
would
the
mean
fact that they could get sued.
that would mean that the school is paying though.
Yeah, like
Right.
paying
It's
doesn't have
very
to be
minor.
like financial or like in lump sum of cash. It could be
Yeah, it's not
Paying
it's
could
not a
be-
direct payment to the people, but you're still paying.
Yeah.
That comes out of the insurance.
it's still
much.
paying.
Sure, they're paying.
Yeah.
And I don't know that they always have insurance. I don't think they have a lot of insurance for lawsuits in like public education.
And it might be like specific to different
The city
types of
probably has
lawsuits
something.
too.
No, so when my sister sued the school, I don't think it came out of their insurance. It's just like no, and
This
like
is the state tax fund. The school.
So there's
Yeah.
a difference between like city government funds
the
and
state,
like
the
the
student
school district funds. Those are two different funds.
my sister sued the school district.
Right.
And I don't
And
think
so
it came out of their insurance. I think it just literally came from like the budget that has to do with the city. I don't think more often than not they don't have insurance. This
Is that
isn't
a
like
wig?
hospital. Yeah. I don't know. This isn't like a hospital where like where you naturally like they automatically have insurance because lawsuits are likely. It's very rare that people are going to be suing a school. Even when you look at like things that are like the city does, right? Like police officers end up costing something close to $500 million in lawsuits just to police departments every single year. I think they said something stupid like that. I should look up the number. Someone look it up for me. But like that stuff isn't coming out of insurance. That stuff is just most of the time like, oh, okay, hey, here's a thing that the city's going to pay, and then it's going to come out of taxpayer money. We're eating that cost of these bad officers.
Okay.
Not all
All right.
cops are bastards, but a lot of them are.
It all comes out of county funding.
Yeah.
Okay. A fanatic, I'll take that. Okay. All right. I'll take that. I'll take that as a win.